Hello, John Dalton here, Further Emergence Podcast. In this episode, we're going to be going into the Bardo of change or something like that. But before we do that, let's go into a little review of the memes on the Further Emergence Instagram account. What do you call that? Instagram channel. So there's been a few because, we haven't done a podcast since before the holidays. So the first one, I didn't write this particular meme. I don't think the person who wrote this particular meme wrote it either. It's a well-known kind of truism. It's very simple. It's in block letters. The only way out is through. And that's one of those brutal kind of truths, because when you're in it, the last thing you want to hear is, the only way out is through. But it's true. And it's that weird thing that happens when, if you put your hand in the fire, the proverbial fire, the cliched fire, if you put your hand in the fire, you'll pull it out automatically. That's a kind of natural reaction. But on the inside, if you bump into an emotional fire, the understandable reaction is to try to get away from it, to pull back from it. But unfortunately, it doesn't work. Unfortunately, what happens is the fire kind of follows you, chases you. You can't get away from it on the inside. And, you can spend your whole life trying to get away from it, and some people do. They can, you can distract yourself with all sorts of things: food, money, sex, booze, anything. You can use anything to distract yourself from the internal pain. It doesn't work. Eventually it catches up with you, and it's horrible when it does. And that's why the only way out is true is such a that's what I'm saying. It's a brutal truth. But you can kind of use it, or certainly I've just found that in my own experience it works. Knowing it, that the only way out is through, it stops me from trying to get away from the pain. And what I do now is I turn and face it. I turn and face the pain, and I'm a bit like Captain Dan, in Forrest Gump. Captain Dan screaming at the storm, I'm not that crazy, but I'm kind of like turning and facing it and going, all right, let me feel this. Let me feel this pain as much as I can bear. Now that might sound like crazy behavior, but I've found that doing that, weirdly, makes it go quicker, makes the pain go quicker. I can go through the pain quicker. So number one, knowing the only way out is through stops me running, because I know there's no escape. And then I kind of go a step further, and I turn and face it, and I go, right, I want to feel this as much as there is to feel. And weirdly, when I do that, initially it gets worse for about 5 minutes, and it feels unbearable, and then it starts to ease. It changes. So I don't know if that works for everybody, but it certainly works for me. And that's why I like this meme. That's why I put it up, because it's one of those truths. Brutal truth. The only way out is through. The next one I did write, but it's not mine. It's not original. I did make this meme, but it's not mine. I got it from Tara Stiles' partner, I think it was, whose name I can't remember right now. And it's really nice, and it's one of those ones that goes into your mind, and it's like, oh yeah, right. And it says, work like work is easy, move like moving is easy, and relate like relating is easy. And there's something brilliant about that, because what it makes you do is kind of, it's like a nice way of doing as if, or faking it till you make it, which is kind of, when you say fake it till you make it, it brings up kind of like, oh, I'm a faker. It just sort of triggers my imposter syndrome, feelings of imposter syndrome. Whereas if you you kind of consciously, no, I'm going to work like working is easy. I'm going to move like moving is easy. I'm going to relate like relating is easy. Yeah, I can kind of get behind that. I can kind of go, yeah, okay, I'm just going to pretend. I'm just going to playfully, do that. And there's something lovely about that. And just having that around reminds me. And it's set against a picture of a traffic jam. A traffic jam, that's a picture I took. I was actually stuck in that traffic jam. And I thought, yeah, that's a good. In the middle of the traffic jam, this beautiful sun appeared through the clouds, and it was just lovely. It's like, yeah, I'm working like working is easy right now. The next one is a quote from Buckminster Fuller, whose first name is Richard, which I didn't know. And it says, we must do away with the absolutely specious notion that everybody has to earn a living. It's a fact today that 1 in 10,000 of us can make a technological breakthrough capable of supporting all the rest. The youth of today are absolutely right in recognizing this nonsense of earning a living. We keep inventing jobs because of this false idea that everybody has to be employed at some kind of drudgery because, according to Malthusian Darwinian theory, he must justify his right to exist. So we have inspectors of inspectors and people making instruments for inspectors to inspect inspectors. The true business of people should be to go back to school and think about whatever it was they were thinking about before somebody came along and told them they had to earn a living. So I think that's fantastic. And that, like Buckminster Fuller, he's a very interesting fella. I don't know nearly enough about him as I would like to. I know about his geodesic domes, which are fantastic. If you've ever seen anything on domes, geodesic domes or dome homes, they are just fantastic. And they just look like a lovely... I mean, he didn't invent geodesic domes, I don't think. Maybe he did. But the dome homes are beautiful. On so many levels, and they're really resistant to wind, which is, I don't know if you can hear it, but it's very windy outside. It's like a gale is blowing, and the rain is coming, and then it stops, and then there's a beautiful rainbow, and then it goes back to raining again. So, but anyway, Buckminster Fuller, he's good on so many levels, and he would have said this like back in the 60s or 70s. And I mean, we're still in the middle of this kind of question about this idea. I, for my whole life, had this strongly, but I was surrounded by lots of people who were like saying, oh no, you have to get a job, you have to do that thing. It's not like I don't want to work. I love working. I work probably, all the time, because I just enjoy what I do. I did take a break. I try and take 2 breaks every year, 2 weeks every 6 months. That's kind of what I aim for. So I'm just actually finishing doing that, having my little 2-week break. And it's amazing. It's like meditation. It's like that thing. I'm going off the topic here, I know, but it's fine. I'll circle back. It's like meditation in that, but the way I do meditation, where I have my little alarm and it goes off, and then I've got that question of like, I don't want to stop doing what I'm doing. I don't want to stop making that email. I don't want to, I'm doing something very important here. And that's part of the process. And then I stop and I do my 15-minute meditation, and then I reset my alarm for another hour and 15 minutes, and then it goes off again, and I go through the process again. The 2-week every 6 months is similar because it takes me about 3 or 4 days. At this time, it took me nearly a week to, stop wanting to do things or stop doing things, because when I'm in full swing, I'm just doing one thing after the next, after the next, after the next. And, whether it's lighting the fire, making a podcast, making an NFT, that's my alarm going off, making an NFT, writing, it's chopping wood, it's all the same, but it's just like one thing after another. And so it takes a while for that momentum to stop, Like I've watched a few documentaries, and I've investigated a little bit this thing of dark room therapy. I don't know if you know about it, but it's where you go into a darkened room where it's completely black. And you can do this for like days. And they're all set up, and they take care of you, and they send your food through a little hatch. But there's nothing in there. There's a bed, there's a bathroom, and there's a little space to meditate or do yoga or whatever. But it's completely dark. And initially you go a bit nutty, apparently it has the same effect of releasing chemicals in your brain that are very similar to psychedelic drugs, and that bit's fine. I'm not too concerned about that. But the thing that really struck me was what they talk about in terms of rest. That really it's a process of when you go through all the brain chemistry stuff and everything like that. But you stay in there long enough, like 6 days, 7 days, your system, your whole being gets to rest. Sounds very confronting, but sounds like it'd be very powerful. But this idea of rest, like you can have enforced rest, and often like when people get illnesses, part of it is that their system just needs to rest. And you can kind of get the jump on that a little bit if you force yourself to rest. Like I knew a homeopath years ago. My mother used to go to her all the time. And she used to take a day every month, I think it was, where she would just take to her bed as if she was ill. But she was doing it as a preventative thing. She would go to bed and rest for the whole day in bed, have her meals brought to her and be treated as if she was not well. But she was fine. But she was just resting. She was doing it proactively rather than having it reactively. So I think is a really smart thing to do. So yeah, there's what Bucky, as his friends used to call him, I would like to think I would be his friend, used to call him, or says in this thing is that we've pretty much got the technology to take care of everybody. So really the idea of having to work to justify your existence is not an issue of technology. It's an issue of thinking and consciousness. That if we redistributed the focus of things a little bit differently, then everybody could just have a lot more time to do the things that they wanted to do. Like really, we are caught in a kind of a dream here. And it's a very pervasive dream. It's a very intense dream in terms of, how to make money, how to live, how to survive, and all that kind of thing. I think we're in the death throes of it at the moment, or certainly it's being shaken up because it's got so extreme. The extremes of poverty and wealth are so extreme now, and so many different things have happened to kind of shake it up and shake up the way things have been, that it's looking different now. It's starting to look different now. But then it always looks like that. So, maybe it'll take another 100 years. I don't know. We'll have to see. But that's a great quote, I think, from Buckminster Fuller. And I would encourage you to find out more about him. He's brilliant. Next one I did write. It's not really a meme. It's more a little kind of descriptive kind of thing. And it's a picture. It's a very strong picture of a heart, an anatomical representation of a heart. And it's red. It's set against a black background, so it's pretty intense. And it starts off, it's called the open heart. And it said, the heart is often described as a pump, clenching like a fist to drive blood around the body. But that's not what's really going on. As we develop embryologically, the heart begins as a ribbon of muscle that folds around itself to form the heart. The heart doesn't clench in on itself to pump blood. Instead, it moves in an unraveling motion, stretching out to return to that flat ribbon stage. So it's stretching out, rather. So instead of pumping blood, this stretching and unraveling motion causes a vacuum which sucks blood around the body. Now, the significance of that is this is a beautiful distinction because it highlights that our hearts are continually opening and expanding. And opening and expanding heart is a lovely focus for right now. Let my heart open continuously to love. So that's beautiful. It's a beautiful distinction, you know. Really is when you get into it and you think about your heart. Your heart is such an important thing. It's such an important energy focus in your body, you know. And to sort of shift it from this idea of, you know, it's pumping it around and squeezing and pumping the blood around, you know. Like when you do the mechanics of it, your heart isn't capable of pumping blood around your body. It's way too small. Because you know, when you think about the miles of blood vessels in your body, and the size of the capillaries towards the end, you know, because it's a circuit, but the vessels get smaller and smaller and smaller until they go through the capillaries, and then they start to get bigger and bigger and bigger as the venous blood returns to the heart and lungs to get reoxygenated. But I think you'd have to have a pump the size of a house to be able to actually pump that blood around. So there's a lot more involved in the movement of blood in your body. But coming back to the heart, the idea of it squeezing the blood around versus the idea of it sucking the blood is hugely different, because when your heart is squeezing, it sort of makes you tight and squeeze up on the inside. Whereas when it's sucking the blood, it's sucking by expanding, and through expanding, it's creating a vacuum, which is an emptiness, which, you know, is my natural predisposition toward emptiness, you know, in terms of meditation and the mystery and that kind of thing. I gravitate towards emptiedness, meaning the emptying of thoughts and everything else. So that my heart opening, creating a vacuum, and into which the blood flows, that's beautiful, isn't it? Because then I'm, instead of thinking about closing my heart and compressing my heart and crunching down, I'm thinking about it opening and expanding. That's beautiful. I love that. All right, the next one is, I didn't write this, but it's beautiful. It says, keep my anger from becoming meanness, keep my sorrow from collapsing into self-pity, keep my heart soft enough to keep breaking, keep my anger turned towards justice, not cruelty. Remind me that all of this, every bit of it, is for love. Keep me fiercely kind. That's beautiful, isn't it? Keep my heart soft enough to keep breaking. That's really important. Really important, you know. That's basically not walking by the homeless person. It's you might walk by the homeless person, but you don't shut your heart off to it. That you feel it. You feel the pain that causes you in your heart when you see that person in that situation. And, you know, it's nothing to, it's completely separate to whether you're moved to actually do anything about that or what you do or whatever. But it's the thing of not turning away. It's not closing your heart, not letting your heart get rigid or hard. Keeping it soft, keeping it soft enough to keep breaking. There's great wisdom in that. And then this thing of keep me fiercely kind. I am a sucker for putting two words together that don't normally live together. So the idea of someone being fiercely kind, something beautiful about that. Yes, keep me fiercely kind. And then the next one is, this is a quote from Rumi. I did a little reel on this, experimenting with reels. My God, they're painful. Anyway, it says, you are not a drop in the ocean. You are the entire ocean in a drop. And that's beautiful. Good old Rumi. Rumi had some great stuff. And it's this idea of, which I've talked about before, of being part of something that I know is bigger than I am. And yet and knowing that I contain it all within me, and yet I'm also a part of it. So I'm a drop of the ocean. I am a drop of the ocean, but I'm also the ocean, or the entire ocean is contained within the drop that I am. That's why, other people can say, I am God, and it's true, that statement is true. But then, of course, they can go. My mind can get caught up with that, and then I can turn into a megalomaniac, and I can start a cult. But in its essence, it's true. But like most things in my experience in the spiritual life, there's a paradox. Everything's a paradox, meaning, I have that within me, but I'm also conscious of my very limited perspective on it. It'd be like one of the cells in my fingernail going, I am a human body. Technically, that's true. You're part of a human body. But you possibly don't have the bigger perspective. So I'm always humbled by my lack of perspective. And that, things, I don't understand why things happen. I don't understand why things are the way they are. It's not the way I would do it. But then I surrender to it. I surrender to the vastness that I am part of. But then I don't make myself less than it. I don't go, oh, I'm unworthy, like that kind of Monty Python thing. I kind of know that's why this thing sums it up so well. It's like I'm not a drop in the ocean. I'm the entire ocean in a drop. But then there is still an ocean. You can't get away from that. There is still an ocean. And my sense of it, and because I've got it inside me, is that it knows it has a bigger perspective. It can see a bigger thing than I can. So it's between these two all the time, That one got a good response, that one did. That meme. And then the last one is be your own souvenir. There's something great about that. Not really sure what, but it just speaks to me. When I came across that, I was like, yeah, okay, yeah, that makes sense. Not really sure why, as I say. But then I think that's one of the great things about art, is that things that can just penetrate you, get straight through, past my mind, right into my heart, into the depths of me, and it's something's communicated. And my mind hasn't caught up with that one yet. It hasn't kind of figured it out, but I get it. Be your own souvenir. Yeah, so I'm not going to explain that one, or I don't really have an explanation for that one, but I think it's brilliant, and that's why I put it up, and I think it's really profound. It's about being your own souvenir. And I can feel my mind kind of racing around going, oh, hang on, I'll come up with a good thing about that, so I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to move on. So, in farm news, mostly the weather, really. I mean, I got through the holidays well. Temperature didn't go down too much. It's cold now, but, I'm here with my little doggies who are asleep in front of the fire. So it's very nice here. The main thing, I think, has just been the weather, really. And there's been a slight leak in the roof. Unfortunately, it's in the room where I do the one-to-one sessions. So I think I'm going to have to evacuate that room because it's just been a kind of seepage thing, but now it's got worse. The seepage has got worse. And I think there's a bit of mold that's going to come in there. And my sense is to change the room. So now I'm going to have to move my whole setup. So not looking forward to that. I finally wrote an About Me section on the Further Emergence website. I don't know why. I suppose because I've lived a long time and I do lots of different things, it's very hard to put it all together in one package. Maybe that's why it took me so long to do that. But anyway, I did it. And yeah, I think it turned out well. So yeah, feel free to go and have a read of it and let me know what you think. Now, I've seen a couple of things over the holidays that I wanted to recommend to you. The first one is the Banshees of Inishirin. It's an Irish movie with Colin Farrell and Brendan Gleeson. And it's one of those movies that's really stayed with me. Like, I can watch a movie and the next day I'd be hard pushed to even remember what I watched. Let's see, I don't really remember what I watched last night. Oh yeah, I watched a bit of The Black Hole, Disney's Black Hole. I want to see if it was as bad as I remembered. Or I remember watching it back then and wasn't that impressed. And I thought, well, maybe it's grown on me now. I didn't watch. I turned it off halfway through. I think I fell asleep. That's right. I fell asleep in it. Whereas the Banshees of Inishirin, that stayed with me for a couple of days. It's very symbolic. I found it very symbolic. I found it funny in spots. It's a bit gruesome, I have to say, but then it's metaphoric gruesomeness, if you like. But yeah, and I thought Colin Farrell was brilliant in it. I think it's the best thing I've seen him in since Tigerland. We used to rent a house from Colin Farrell when we lived in Dublin. And I know his brother and his partner, Stephen Farrell, who's been on this podcast. No, he's been on. I had him on the other podcast, the Art podcast, and they're all lovely. So yeah, it's lovely seeing Colin Farrell working, and Brendan Gleeson's great. Everybody's great in it, but it's more the story, the bleakness of the environment, the beauty of the environment, and what it means. And I'm obviously not going to give anything away, but it's yes, I'm not going to give anything away. No, you won't get a spoiler out of me. But you can write into me and ask me what I thought about it, or what I got out of it. So I'll respond if someone writes in. John@furtheremergence.com is the email address. But I definitely recommend it to you. I think it's if you're an artist, it's profound. And if you're interested in consciousness and spiritual pursuit, it's profound as well. And then the other movie that I watched that was similarly powerful is called Bardo. And then the subtitle text on it is False Chronicle of a Handful of Truths. And it's by a Mexican director, Alejandro Inarritu. Probably slaughtered his name. Sorry about that. And it is very good. Now, maybe I found it good because I've been interested in the whole idea of Bardo since I read the Tibetan Book of Living and Dying. And my take on what Bardo stands for is it's a transitional space. So from the Tibetan perspective, when you die, your soul, in inverted commas, goes into the Bardo, which is a kind of a transitionary state between one state of consciousness and the next. And in my own experience, it's a bit like dreaming. From reading their descriptions of it, it's a bit like dreaming in that you can get lost in the Bardo, and you can, wander around in the Bardo for a long time, or you can get confused and, from the Tibetan perspective, get reincarnated badly or something like that. This idea of getting lost in the Bardo. And that's why their focus is on preparing for death, is spending their whole life preparing for death, preparing for the Bardo, preparing for that confusing time. Something about that I like. Because I've been thinking about certainty a lot in the last couple of weeks. I think about certainty often anyway, and how certainty is really a desire to try and feel, or to insulate yourself from, or insulate myself from the uncertainty that's around. And I'm not talking about what's happening, politically or geopolitically or anything like that. I'm talking about just the uncertainty of anything could happen at any time. And that's terrifying. You know, I often think of that movie Donnie Darko as a good example of it. It's like it's a normal kind of story, and then out of nowhere, this huge thing happens, falls out of the sky, and that can happen at any time, and we know that. But I know that, but I don't want to think about it. I don't want to think about all the different things that could happen, and of course, my mind, because it's predisposed towards trying to protect me from imagined danger, just imagines all terrible things that could happen to me, which is a shame because it blocks out the other half. It's just like there's just as much chance of something amazing happening as something terrible happening, And then, as I've said before, as the further you get back from that, it's all the same. Good thing, bad thing, it's all the same. It's all part of that sort of never-ending change thing. So, going back to this movie, the filmmaker, I think, is interested in the Bardo experience as well. So it's a very beautiful film. It's mostly in Spanish, and it's very dreamlike, yet there is a coherent narrative there. Doesn't look like it at the beginning, but there is a coherent narrative there. And it's also quite self-reflective, and he kind of breaks the fourth wall, sort of, in that even though it's not the director or the writer in the movie, he's kind of talking about himself, and he's talking about, oh no, I've written myself into the movie kind of thing, which is a bit like that other Charlie Kaufman movie, which is similar kind of thing. So yeah, I think it's really good. I think the Bardo it's just Bardo, Bardo, is I recommend it, and I'd like to know what you think of it. I'd like to know how it landed with you. Okay, that's all I've got for you today. I trust you're well. I wish you are well. Let me give you my wishes, my well wishes for this year, 2023. I wish you're well. I wish you have good cheer. I'll talk to you again soon. Bye.